Hi, welcome back. This is the last of period 2. This is the last episode. And basically, again, remember period 2 is about 1650 to 1750, more or less. The next piece is going to be the causes of the revolution. We did the earlier pieces, early contact, and that was extremely important. I think that was interesting. And then part of period 2 would be the middle colonies. Remember, we did Sprite for all of the colonies. How were they established? And then we're really comparing north and south southern colonies. That's a big concept. Because what's going to happen is when we're really looking to the end game, which is the Civil War. And so I think one of the big things in this era that we're looking at is how is the culture north and south and the economy, the Sprite, develop into the Civil War. That's way down the line. And kind of the point is the seeds, I like this concept, the seeds of future development are planted in the colonial era. So that's just one of the topics that you want to walk away with. So the seeds, the Puritans, that's going to relate to American culture. The economy, that's going to also relate to the American Revolution. The politics, it's going to relate to the American Revolution, and then post-revolution to the Constitution. And so I hope you understand that. The reason why we pay so much attention to these early eras is that they relate to how our country develops in the future. And so I think it's extremely important. By the way, this is some music that we're looking at or listening to is from the colonial era. This is a colonial era music. And can I just take a minute to show you what it is? These are colonial reenactors. And they go and they live in the style of the colonial era. And lots of people do this as a hobby, especially back east. But then they glorify the earlier era by reenacting it because they think it's valuable and important and interesting. So all of those are really kind of neat things you can look at. Okay, so if you would like, I recommend that you look at this link right here. This link is about the colonial music, and I think you can explore a bit if you're into that. All right. So today we're going to talk about or explain Bacon's Rebellion, which is about 1675. So that's middle to, and then connecting to later. Bacon's Rebellion, that's going to relate to the Revolution eventually. It's 100 years before the Revolution, but it's going to tell us that the Revolution, or it's going to tell us that everything wasn't perfect in the colonies. Okay, so that's what why we pay attention to that, and that's a very interesting story. And then we're going to revisit the essays briefly to reinforce how you're going to write them or what information you should know now to be able to write it. And then we're going to finish the French and Indian War. We're going to start and finish the French and Indian War, which is very, very important to the causes of the Revolution. So that's the plan for today, and I hope you get it. And again, keep in your notebook an area, as you put the heading and you put the date. Every day you take notes on it, and then you outline it. You don't just do paragraphs, fat paragraphs. I don't want fat paragraphs. I want outline. Topic, main idea, main idea, main idea. And then you're going to, summarize. You'll probably send me some summaries. Anyway, So, so make a spot for questions. Okay? Ask questions as you go along, as you're paying attention to this. If you have a question, write it down and then ask in the Zoom or in any of the, the live face-to-face. Okay? All right, let's keep going. So Bacon's Rebellion. Again, the one thing I want you to know is Bacon's Rebellion is 1670s, more or less. And what it's going to relate to is a problem between the settlers and the government of the colony. And this is in Virginia. VA is Virginia. Okay, so that's one. It's going to be an issue of rich versus poor. It's going to be an issue of East versus West. The West are the poor, the East are the rich. And it's going to be a whole big deal, but not really much is going on with it. It's not a big, it's just insight into there are problems in these colonies, and these problems exist all through the colonial era, and they're bubbling under the surface. And so and basically it's going to give insight into the revolution. That's why we care about it. Okay? So real quick, Virginia has a class conflict. It's rich versus poor, especially as land starts to become scarce. So it's got an economic connection. New immigrants and former indentured servants, remember indentured servants, they do their service, and then they want to go make their life. They want to make a life, right? And they need land. And where do they get the land? From the Indians. They take over Indian land, or they go in the wilderness and take it over, or they buy it from speculators, but it's really Indian land. People move west, and this causes native problems. Again, when natives and whites come in contact, there's conflict. And it begins right at the time of King Philip's War. Do you remember that? King Philip's War is in New England, and this is down here in Virginia. Now, so in order to understand this, you got to understand, what is this thing called the Tidewater? The Tidewater is this region here. This was the most fertile land. It was the most productive. It was the best areas. And basically what's happening is people are moving west. This is the Shenandoah Valley here. This is the Shenandoah Valley. It's a big deal. But this is the best land over here. This is the best land. And the problem was that it was already taken by kind of wealthy people. And the poor indentured servants are coming in to this area, especially in the Blue Ridge, which is the Shenandoah Valley. And they're trying to settle it. But here's the problem. Over here, there's tons of Indians, and they don't like the whites moving into their territory, and there's fighting. There's conflict. There's conflict. There's fighting. Indentured servants versus Indians. There's fighting out here. All right? This area was the rich. This area is the poor indentured servants. And so that's the background or the context. Remember, you got to pay attention to context. Remember what context is. It's before a problem, before, during, and after a problem. All right? Or before, during, and after to understand the problem, whatever that problem is here. So that's the Tidewater. Okay? So what happens is violence erupts on the western portion of Virginia, and that's this. We get violence over here in the west because the indentured servants are coming into conflict with the Indians. That's the context. Frontier settlers asked for protection from Governor Brinkley. Governor Brinkley is the royal governor, and he is seen as completely corrupt and serving the needs of the rich. The rich are in the East. He was a royal appointee. He was seen as corrupt, protecting the landowners of the East. And the people in the West were Bacon's people, and they said, hey, you can't, we need help. Give us money to kill the Indians. Let's get an army. Let's go kill the Indians, and let's take all their land. And Brinkley said no. Brinkley did not send an army. He did build a couple forts, but he didn't send an army because the army costs money, and who's going to pay for it were the rich in the East. Do you follow? The rich in the East did not want to spend the money to pay for an army for the people of the West. And that's where Nathaniel Bacon comes in. Bacon wanted to remove the Indian presence in the West. He is supporting the poor people of the West who want their right to kill the Indians with taxes paid for by the colony. You follow? He became a leader of the frontiersmen. He attacked the Indians. He called on the colony to arrest Bacon. Brinkley called for Bacon's arrest because they were causing problems in the West. Well, Bacon becomes powerful in the West, right? And they call for resistance to Brinkley. And he goes after Brinkley. So now it's the West is attacking Brinkley in the East. So now it's not about Indians, it's about the government of the colony. And so what they're doing is they're attacking the government of the colony. Brinkley flees. Bacon dies of natural causes. Interesting. And so this is maybe a much ado about nothing, but Bacon, by the way, will die from what we call dysentery. Dysentery is basically diarrhea. And my spelling is so bad. So diarrhea, where you expel bodily fluids and die from it because you lose, potassium and sodium, etc. He gets diarrhea and dies, but not after they burn Jamestown. Jamestown is burned in the process. Brinkley sends message to King Charles II, and Charles sent 1,000 soldiers to restore order and to support the government of Virginia. And so in the end, Bacon represents the poor, Brinkley represents the rich and the government. The poor rise up against the rich and the government, and then Bacon dies, and the whole thing fizzles. Meanwhile, Jamestown is burned by accident. Here is an engraving of Bacon. This is the soldier of the 1600s, the typical English, European, or European soldier image. Again, this is the Tidewater region here. That's known as the Tidewater. And then this is where you're getting the conflict in the West, yes. Significance of Bacon Rebellion. It's a prelude to the Revolution. It's 100 years before the Revolution, but it tells us that there is unrest, that things could get out of hand. Conflicts existed. Anglo-Native societies. Again, this is English versus the Indians. It's also now a new conflict of rich versus poor. And that seems to be a theme. And then the royal government is determined when they're threatened to exercise control. And it's mostly an economic interest. They didn't want to spend the money to kill the Indians. Other governments will be less worried about spending money to kill Indians. All right, let's go now, move on to essays. We already talked about this one. The British colonies were so antagonistic, they were unable to unite. Assess the validity. So how truthful is this? And your job is to create a thesis. You brainstorm, you read the question, you analyze the question, etc. You create a thesis, an A, a B, and a C. We call this a three-part complex thesis, which means you have a main topic that you're going to argue plus a detail, plus a detail, and plus a detail. So for this one, it says that you have to brainstorm. Were the colonies antagonistic, and were they unable to unite? Were they able to unite? And by the end of this unit, you should be able to say, yeah, they were able to unite. And I would argue against the Indians is the main category. Detail, King Philip's War. Get it? They're able to unite against the Indians, the French and Indian War. They're able to unite against the French and the Indians. That's your detail. And then in the Revolution, or they will unite against the English. Do you follow? That's how I would write that one. They were not antagonistic. They were able to unite, but only in extreme circumstances. And you can qualify that. So that was one. Another one that you could do is economic, geographic, social factors encourage slavery. Factors to slavery. That's a big one. Again, this is 1600s. And remember, slavery rises over time. Okay, 1600. By the way, what declines over time? What goes down over time? Indentured servitude goes down. Okay, so slavery goes up, indentured servitude goes down, because slavery will be more efficient. So again, your A, your B, and your C. And again, your thesis will be factors that increase slavery are A, economic, B, geographic, and C, social. And so again, 3 paragraphs, that's it. Again, persuasive essay. Economic means profitability. Geographic means climate, especially of the South. And then culture, social factors would be attitudes. Coolidge. And then you would write a whole body paragraph, topic sentence, and then paragraph about this topic. Social factors that increased slavery. Hope you're getting that. And then this is the new one, and this is the one that we're going to do right now, 1754 to 74, and that's going to be the whole other unit going on, period 3. A profound alteration in the relationship occurred between American colonists and their mother country, Great Britain. This changing relationship, this is the key idea, became painfully obvious to both parties with the opening of the American Revolution. Prefacing. Identify and explain factors. Bam. You're looking for factors which brought about the changing relationship. What were the factors that caused the revolution? And it's going to be, guess what? Sprite. Sprite. What are the Sprite factors? Social factors, political factors, religious factors, intellectual, technological, and economic. Which ones do you think are most important? My money says economics, political, and social. I don't know, religious is going to be an issue. Intellectual, I don't think is an issue. And technological isn't an issue. These are the big issues. These are the factors. Look for that as we go into the causes for the revolution. All right, let's transition now to the French and Indian War.